I want to talk about street photography and the two lenses I find most useful, and how this work morphed into my first ever solo gallery show. So let's dive right in. I had a chance to go on a trip to China, and on that trip I took along a rangefinder film camera and a few lenses. Zeiss 25-28, you need the viewfinder for that, Zeiss 35 f2, and a Zeiss 85 f4. I use the two shorter lenses the most. Now on this trip I was shooting Ilford Delta 100 film, and I probably shot it at around ISO 60 and then came back and processed it in, the developer I was using at the time was Ilford ID11. So one film and one camera, two lenses. I did also take the 85, but I didn't use it. So I've got the two Zeiss lenses, the 25 and the 35. Now, would these pictures have been better had I shot them on a Leica 35 f2 and a Leica 24mm lens? I didn't really find the sharpness and the image quality be the issue with the picture, so I'm going to say that there wouldn't have been any difference except for bragging rights if instead of using the less costly Zeiss lenses, I had actually used Leica glass. Always up for debate. Are the Leica lenses better, and would your pictures be better if they were shot on a Leica lens? I'm not sure they would be, but everyone has their own opinion about that. Now this series of photos shot over a couple of weeks of time. We started off in the big cities and we moved to like smaller cities. They still had 4 million people, but there's definitely a different vibe when you get out of the main cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and you get into the smaller cities, which are still huge by our standards, but not huge by their standards. Now, one thing to remember with a trip like this is you're going to have a preconceived idea of what a place like China is like. And it's distorted by their North American views and what we see in the media and what is reported about China. So basically everything we know about China is a lie, or propaganda, or biased news at very best. So I had a view of what I was expecting, and the problem with that is I'm now trying to create images that support my preconceived view. And if your preconceived view is incorrect, which it probably is if you've never been there before, then you're looking for pictures, you're searching for a China that doesn't truly exist, but kind of fulfills that preconceived view. Now, sometimes reporters say you need to do some research, you need to have these preconceived views so you know what you're looking for. And other times people say you're best to have no research and just go and see and observe. So you bring with you, I think, the more that you know, you bring with you this preconceived idea of what China is like. And so now I'm searching for a China that's in my mind that is not in the reality. But that's how it worked out. Now let's talk for a minute about street photography itself. I'm shooting in China. Now here's a common type of shot that people get. And I think in street photography they call it the trap. So you find a background that is appropriate and a background that you like, and you think that there's a photo potential to this background, and you wait there and you see. So in this instance, I liked this background and I waited for people to walk through it. Now, I probably was there for an hour. I liked the background, I had nothing else to do. I waited there and people walked through, and then you pick later the image that is the most interesting. So a lot of people are just walking through, there's lots of different character possibilities, and I like this woman pushing her bike because she had a flat tire and she was pushing it back home. I just thought it was a little more interesting. Now in a perfect world, what's going to walk through your background is like a group of elephants. That'd be perfect, right? We've seen pictures from historical times where, you know, people were downtown in a city and the circus elephants walk through. That's what you're looking for. In my own life, the best scenario ever was a kid went by on a unicycle. So you find a background and you wait for the people to walk through and then you take the photo. That's the trap. I think that's what people call it anyways. That's what I'm referring to it as. So in the trap, there's a couple of things that are going on. First off, you have to wait a few minutes. You figure out the scene. Maybe the lighting is fantastic. Maybe the scene is fantastic. and maybe the people coming through are fantastic. But it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes your great scene is on the side of a road, and further up the road there's a ditch and no one walks on that side of the road. There's no traffic. There's whatever you're waiting for is never going to happen. So you do kind of have to watch and see, is your perfect background just an area where there's no human contact and there's never going to be anything to walk through it. So you've got to watch out for that. The other thing with this type of photo, now with a rangefinder there's an advantage, and that is that you see outside the frame line. So you can see a person walking into your frame, wait for them to get into the perfect spot, take that decisive moment photo, and then they'll walk through and out of the frame. So there is a slight advantage using a rangefinder because you see the people entering the frame, and if your picture that you want to take, they're close to the edge of the frame, you can kind of time that a little bit better. So that's the trap, and that's what I used here with this woman with the flat tire. So here's the second example of the trap. I saw this woman coming down the road, and she's pulling this cardboard cart. Now, I'll tell you what I don't like about this photo. There's no dignity. And you see this person, they probably don't want their picture taken. It's kind of a humiliating type of a situation. And here's a guy with a photographer, and they're trapped because they've got to walk down that road pulling this cart, and I'm waiting there to take a picture. So it can be positive. In this case, I don't think it's positive. I think it provides no dignity in this photo, but it was one that I took using this technique as well. And I'm sure this person wasn't interested in having their photo taken, although I never asked. Now, we were living in an apartment that was a couple of floors up. The person that I was traveling with, they worked in the morning, so every morning I got up by myself and I went down to the market, and I walked down the stairs, and there was these two bikes there all the time, and they were covered in soot and dust, and even the colors were muted because of the amount of dust on them. And I probably photographed them every day that I walked by, sometimes with the 25, sometimes with the 35. This shot's with the 35 f2, and I just like it best, but I literally photographed these two bikes every day. They never moved, the dust was never wiped off them. I thought it was quite humorous. So I would get up every morning, walk down to the market. The market was in the morning. It probably was wrapped up by around noon. This is one of those outdoor markets that people are selling, local farmers are selling stuff, and local fishermen and things like that. So I would get out there early every day, and I hung out for the whole time of the market. Really, this was the place that I was headed for the day. And people got used to me a bit. Now, I want to kind of talk about that whole fly on the wall lie. So people think, oh, if you could be a fly on a wall, that's an expression for I'm a photographer who's disappearing into the background, and I'm going to take things and show the reality of it. And it's a myth. Now, there would be some situations where you are a fly on the wall, and I would call those very intense situations. You know, if you're at a fire or at an accident and the paramedics are running and working and they don't have time to worry about a photographer, you could be a fly on the wall. But in most situations, if you're in a non-intense situation and people see you're there, there's no fly on the wall. That's a myth. You can't disappear in the background. I don't care how long you wait. They know you're there. Now, when I'm at this market, I'm the only big white guy around, so they know I'm there. And I'm carrying a camera, unconcealed. I am walking around. If you see me, you're going to see the camera. So I'm not hiding the camera. I'm a big guy in an Asian market walking around with a camera. There's no fly on the wall. Everybody knew that I was there. And I think it's a good lesson in the sense that they probably know you're there. And this whole fly on the wall thing becomes a myth, as I said, unless it's a very intense situation. So I'm trying to take these photos. I've got my camera out. I'm there for all morning and again tomorrow and again tomorrow. They kind of get used to you. I am very courteous. I'm smiling at people. I'm trying not to be a jerk. And then I'm taking photos and I'm letting people know that I'm taking their photos. I don't think anyone kind of waved me off that they didn't want to have their photo taken. And some, I'm not saying that they posed, but they did, smile or change their expression possibly, or during the interaction, maybe they were honored a little bit, but that this guy was taking their photo. Interesting. Anyways, so they did allow me to take their photos, and this woman working with their cart. You know, this is shot with a 25mm lens, so I'm quite close. She obviously knows I'm there. I'm a big white guy with a camera very close. I'm not stealing the photo, but anyways, I got this expression from this woman on the bike, and this other vendor, they kind of had a bike of market products, and the chicken cutter. Now, of the whole series, the chicken cutter is my favorite photo, partly because I feel it might have better market value as I'm taking it, better saleability value because of things like chicken flu and bird flu. So it had a kind of a newsiness to it a little bit more in a subtle way, with the bird flu coming from China, and here's an open market where they're, you know, got birds. So it's probably my favorite photo. Again, shot with a 25. I'm up pretty close. I'm not stealing the photo. They definitely know I'm there. And you can see the detail in the background, and you really get a great feel for what this market is like. Had you shot that same shot with a 75 or a 90, I think it'd be a totally different photo, and I wouldn't find it as interesting. It'd be possible to do, but I wouldn't find it as interesting. And that brings me to an interesting point. So I took the 25 and the 35 and a Zeiss 85 f4. And on the trip, I never used the 85. I just felt that it wasn't that kind of close-up portrait situation. I was happy to get the wide-angle portraits, show more detail of the scenario, and I shot really nothing with the 85. And as a result, when I came back, I thought, why do I even own this lens? I just went to China for weeks and I didn't even shoot with it. So I ended up getting rid of it. So at the market, there's the different venues, and there's the fishmonger. So I saw him every day, and I photographed him a couple of times. Interesting scenario. One day, he's got this giant eel, live eel, that is for sale, and people are kind of crowded around, and I'm interested, and we're looking at this giant eel swimming in this little tub that he's got there. And this woman dressed up quite well and a little bit fancy, she comes down and she buys this meal, and she's telling everybody she's got special guests coming for dinner. Special guests coming for dinner. So she's bought this eel. What a treat. Anyways, it turned out we were having dinner that night with the person I was traveling with, one of their co-workers, and it was her son, and she was making a special meal for us. I was the person that was getting the special eel, and it seemed like a treat when I was at the market. I'm not sure it was such a treat when we were eating it. It wasn't my favorite eel meal, let's just put it that way. Anyways, this is the fishmonger at the market. Now, as we leave the market kind of photos, in a country like this, you have it's probably a bias, but you feel that you can just go into people's personal space and take their photos. So again, I'm shooting a lot of the portraits with a 25, and I would go into people's yards and take pictures, kind of like this is in someone's yard, and I found it interesting. It's just different than what I'm used to, so I took a photo of it. And this final photo here, this is a very calm area. So there's a temple and a gardens, and it's very quiet and very peaceful. And I always felt that I wanted to show the calmness of this area through the calmness of my photograph. And this would have been shot with the 35 Zeiss lens. So I return home, I process my rolls of Delta 100, and I'm starting to make these gallery prints. And I have an opportunity to put together a show. It's like a studio tour, and I'm part of this tour, and I'm going to have this show of work. And so I print the work, and I think this is key if you're having a show. I print the work on 20 by 24 paper, darkroom prints, and some of the work needed to be cropped. So I would suggest that you don't crop your work. But the reason I say that is not some aesthetic. The reason I say that is because you want to use as much of the negative as you can and get the highest quality print you can. And if you start to crop and blow it up and lose some of that information, then you're just not going to have as sharp a picture as you could. So For that reason, I think you should shoot full frame. There is an aesthetic like, oh, I shoot full frame, you know, and as I mentioned in other videos, Cartier-Bresson, the great, you know, the father of photojournalism, talked about shooting full frame, except that his very most popular photo was not full frame. It's a cropped image behind the station. Anyways, try to shoot full frame to use all of the geography that you can. Now, when you're doing a show, it is in your best interest, in my view, to print everything the same size exactly. So if you're going to crop one picture a little bit because it needs to be cropped, then maybe consider cropping everything so that the matte sizes are the same and the frame sizes are the same. So it's much less a nightmare when you're finally, you know, you've got these 12 pictures and you've got 12 frames and 12 mattes, that everything is the same. If everything is slightly different by, you know, 4 or 5 millimeters here and 4 or 5 millimeters there, it becomes a bit tougher to line up and make sure you've got the right picture and the right matte in the right frame. It's much simpler if you just frame everything the same, matte everything the same, and print everything the same. That's my view. And the second part of that is, if your pictures go in a gallery show and they don't sell, maybe you can reuse those frames for another show down the road if it's standardized. But if it's a unique image, a unique cropping, a unique matte, a unique frame, then the next one that's going to use that frame is going to also have to be that unique shape. So that'd be the one kind of point that I would make if you're putting together a gallery show. Anyways, I put together this gallery show, 20 by 24 prints, all printed the same, matted the same, framed the same. Now here's my second bit of advice. Again, I said I took 3 lenses, 85, never really used it, 35, 25. When you look at the photos individually, it doesn't matter what lens you use. You can shoot this one with a 35, this one with a 25, this one with this one with that. When it's a single photo, it doesn't matter. But when it's a show, when it's a group of photos, I think it's an error shooting with 2 lenses. So when you're shooting, there's a rhythm to the photographs, and there's a rhythm to the prints when you look at them later. And every time you switch lenses, you distort and change that rhythm. People call it like the sentence structure. If a writer works and writes in a certain structure, then when they go outside of that structure, it doesn't really fit. It's a rhythm. So I would suggest, I took and shot with 2 lenses. I would suggest, if you're going to put together a show, a group of photos, shoot with 1 lens. Whatever lens you like, there's no rule on what lens you take, but there's a better consistent rhythm, a pace, a sentence structure if the whole show is done with the same lens, in my view. It's a subtle thing, but in my view, you're better off with 1 lens. That's a little bit of an issue. You're going to go around the world and you're going to take a camera with 1 lens. Now, you know, things get dropped into the river, cameras malfunction, maybe they get lost or stolen. If you're only going to go, you're going to go that far, trip of a lifetime maybe, and you're going to take 1 camera and 1 lens. Why do you even have this other stuff? It's an interesting question. What do you do if it breaks? So I know some people take 2 camera bodies and the same lens twice. Okay, that's a little strange. Maybe you take 2 camera bodies and you leave 1 back at the room, safe, and it has a slightly different lens, but at least if something malfunctions or drops in the river or whatever, you're covered because you've got 2 cameras and 2 lenses. But anyways, if you can do it with 1, you're traveling light, you're not weighed down by the gear, and maybe there's a better rhythm to your photos when you look at them as a group photo later on. That would probably be the same with film. There's an advantage, I think, to having the same film stock for the whole shoot. It just fulfills that rhythm, that pattern, and keeps it consistent. But anyways, my point is, you know, traveling light, if I did it again, I would probably just use the 35. I love this 25. This 25 is super sharp. This Zeiss 25-2.8. So I'm using a 25-35. Maybe you could do it all with a 28. You could try that. I've tried that in the past. It's just a little bit wide, and my 28's a 2.8 or a 5.6, which is worse. So a little bit slow for being the only lens that you bring. So I do have a 35 f2. I also have a 35 1.4. Maybe next time I would just bring one lens with the 35 1.4. That would allow you to shoot indoors and outdoors. The 28 again could work, but mine's a little bit slow. And would I buy a 28 f2? Maybe I should. Maybe I should buy a 28 1.4. Hey, the spending never stops, right? That's part of the fun. Anyways, give it a try on your next trip. Film camera, one type of film. I use Delta 100. Maybe one lens. 35 is a good option. 28 is a good option. Whatever your vision is. There's no right answer, but just have that consistent pacing, that consistent rhythm, that consistent sentence structure to your entire show. And, you know, as I said, frame them all the same, mat them all the same, make your life a lot easier. Just saying.